going to have the next session coming in, and the next session is Big Data, why enterprises are struggling and how startups can step in. Before I go ahead and hand over the things to Susheel Kaushik, I just have two things. One is that we're going to have a QA for this session, and in case if you have any questions, and then when Susheel opens it up for you, there's a mic out here. Please come down, and then you can stand in the queue, and then that way it's going to be very helpful for Susheel to know how many questions are there so that we can end the session on time. And if Susheel feels that one of your questions is really great, he's going to reward you with a gift voucher. And at the end of the session, we're going to flash a screen wherein you need to give us your feedback. It's very important. And you just have to give a missed call if you like the session, and there's another number in case if you have other opinion. And by doing so, you're going to enroll yourself to get a lucky draw probably, and then get a grand prize in the evening that's going to be announced at the Aura Hall. So I have Susheel Kaushik here. He is the Senior Director, EMC, and he has been with the, with the big data, and then he's built it from the scratch, and he's going to take it over from here. Susheel.
All right, thanks everyone. First question, how many of you are familiar with big data? The term big data. Okay, so that's very good. And I would say that from my perspective, there were only two countries in the world that have a big data problem, China and India. But unfortunately, we do not have that problem here. I see a lot of empty seats. So let's go ahead and start. Can we have the panel members also on stage? I will run through a stock presentation, which is introducing the topic of big data and data scientists, and after that, we will go into a question and answer session. I'm going to be really fast right now because the focus is to have a good conversation going, and my goal here is to set up the stage before we have the discussion on the interesting topics. So a few seconds of pause while we are waiting. There you go. So everyone is talking about big data. Everyone says, I need to have it. I need to have this tool. But then you walk up to them and say, what are you going to do with it? The answer is, I don't know. So the key question is, we need to understand what are you going to do with big data before you actually want to take a dive into it. So let's stop talking and let's get started. Everyone is creating, as I call it, litter all over the world, litter in terms of digital litter. So you take footsteps on the internet, you're going into a retail store, you're using your phone, you're creating digital shadow. And this is amounting into lots and lots of challenges for technology. Storage needs are increasing, capacity needs are increasing, but the key thing which you need to focus on is that the costs are not increasing. If you see a 10x jump in storage, you see a 10x jump in capacity, and you see 2x jump in technology over 10 years, it doesn't gel well. At a very high level, folks, this is just a quick introduction. If you don't know what big data analytics is, at a very high level, we at EMC call it the 3 V's: velocity, volume, and variety. Volume is basically just sheer size of data. Imagine everyone is sending 1 message a second in India to a company. That's sheer volume. Velocity, you're doing it every second. Now you're doing it every millisecond, every microsecond. That's velocity. And variety is that you're sending text messages, you're sending documents, you're sending all other kinds of data along with the structured data that you have. So the key is that it is so large and complex that it becomes difficult to use existing tools to gain insights from it. And that's exactly what I mean by what are you doing with it. And now if you take back this discussion to the theme, which is about enterprises, take Walmart for an example. They have over 1 billion transactions happening in an hour. Now, if you take that and put it over a period of 3 to 5 years, it becomes 2.5 petabytes of data. Now, that's large amount of data, and if you want to gain insights from it, you need to have platforms that are capable of handling that data as well as giving you insights in coffee time, in my definition. But we will discuss with the panel what the term coffee term means to the enterprises today. And big data analytics is all about gaining insights, actionable insights from this data. So I'll skip one use case, but this is an interesting use case. Imagine there are 8 banks which merge together to create a bigger bank. And now you have a bank manager sitting and a customer walks in and says, okay, I am doing banking with you for the last 7 years. What would you recommend? The challenge is if you don't know much about your customer, the first thing you're going to do is the agent is going to make his wild guess and say, okay, here is the product you should be getting. which means open a checking account or opening a fixed deposit account. Now you take the problem to the company level, where you say one bank of the 8 banks, you have all the information put together in one system, and as a result, you're able to generate some insights from that. So now you're able to do that. What I call it is a profit-based recommendations. So here what you're saying is, based on my company, which is a smaller one of the 8 groups, here is what you should be getting. You make that to the next level, which is about user-based recommendation. You're saying, of all the companies put together, here is the best product which you should be getting. And then what you want to do is that the last stage, which is where you put in not only the information you have, but what all you can get from outside, putting it all together. And at the end, what you're looking for is maximizing your profit by identifying customers who are going to leave you. So this is one of the use cases which we have at EMC, which we took care of at one of our big corporations in US. I will skip this one, but at a very high level, you could do the same for risk management. Imagine you want to do risk profiling. So as you get more information about the customer, you know the risk profile, and as a result, you can be smarter in making decisions when, and identifying patterns which lead to high-risk mortgages. This is my favorite one, which is about Moneyball. How many of you have seen Moneyball? Okay, some few. So if you have not, this is a very good movie. This is about a team called Oakland A's. What they did was, for the last 100 years, ERA is what, unfortunately I could not pick cricket analogy, so sorry about that. ERA is statistics which they use to measure the effectiveness of a pitcher. This is basically about how good are you at preventing runs. So you could use the same thing for a cricket team. So now imagine that using that statistics, you can only find so much about a pitcher. But what if you improve that by making the analysis much more complex? And I won't go into the specifics of what that formula is, but that is what was used to define Sierra. And what Oakland A's did was, as part of using this Sierra as part of the how do you get players into the team? So you are identifying the right pitchers who are best suited for your team. And as a result, you are able to go into the playoffs consistently with minimum salary. So imagine you are not paying your players too much, and at the same time, you're getting the maximum benefit out of them. My belief is that you are paying, most of the teams in the world are paying too much for their players, and especially the star players. So this is what you can do to find out which are the ones which are actually generating value for you rather than just brand names. So how many of the folks have heard of the word data scientist? Okay, so select few. So this slide here is here to highlight that in addition to the usual suspects, you need to have a new skill set which is out there in the world called data scientist. And what does a data scientist do? They extract meaning from data and create data products. And what do they leverage? They leverage, first of all, mathematics, statistics, computer science, machine learning, pattern recognition. You can go on. And basically all they're doing is they're putting all of these things together and generating insights from data. And as per Harvard Business Review, it is the sexiest job in the 21st century. There is no presentation that goes well without a technology or a roadmap or a reference architecture. So I've introduced one reference architecture here. But the key thing which I wanted to highlight was the color purple. These are the components that get impacted when you add big data into the mix. So think of it this way. If you're a traditional enterprise, everything else is out there. You have ingestion issues, you have assimilation issues, you have storage and access issues. So that is the lower half of the picture. But then the purple things are the ones that actually get impacted if you're looking into the big data use cases. So on the ingestion side, you're talking about getting new types of data coming in, new types of documents coming in. In the storage and access, you're talking about how do I handle with this much amount of data and how do I process it. Analysis is pretty much wholesale revamp, because you're talking about doing analysis at a per customer customization. I call it mass personalization as opposed to generalization. And then finally, visualization is the key, because if you cannot visualize and make the business users, Obama won, so that's good. We'll wait for, okay, all right. So, and visualization is the key, because you want the business users to make decisions. They don't, I mean, I call lots of information that is being generated as oohs and ahs. The goal is that team of people sit there, the decision maker comes and says, ooh, the number went up, the number went down. But what are you doing about it? So the key thing is that you need to enterprises, what are the challenges they face, and why they are unable to adopt or take the advantage of big data. The key thing which I did want to highlight on this slide was, why did the online use cases work? So there were three important things which you need to consider. The first one was that everything had to be done at scale. So imagine, a recommendation had to be done at scale, which means it was not possible for a human being to do so. The second one was actions were automated. The moment you have human interaction in the mix, everything would slow down. And as a result, new business processes were created. So far, online use cases were successful because there were these three characteristics. And of course, you had to have a strong data science team out there which is helping you build all these complex optimization models and recommendations engines in order to derive maximum business value. So that brings down to the point that, from my perspective, the way I see it is that I have defined the early adopters and the innovators as the online use cases. Predominantly, that's what you will see in the market right now. What we are finding is that as you go into the enterprises, we are finding challenges. Technology is there, people are there. So why are the enterprises having challenges when it comes to adopting big data analytics? So we have a great panel, and rather than me doing the injustice of introducing the folks, think of it as a theme. We have someone who's a producer of technology, someone who's a consumer of technology, someone who's an investor, and I didn't know where to put myself, so I'll call myself an all-rounder. So can we start with the extreme end of the table? So Raghu, can you introduce yourself? You are in the investor category.
Yeah, I'm a founder and general partner at Venture East. We're an early stage venture fund. We're actually one of India's oldest venture funds, about 16, 17 years, and we pretty much do things in the early stage, technology and life sciences with two different funds. But beyond that, I guess they want me to talk about what we might look at investing, but I'll let the others introduce themselves and then we'll chat.
Hi, I'm Sunil. I'm CEO of Bizosis Technologies. We are a technology solutions company. So the technology bit is where we actually create products in big data. So we have Edge Search, which is Hadoop Search, a search engine built on top of Hadoop. And that's an open source product. So technology, we invest in open source. And what we give to our clients is a solution. So we provide them solutions in the big data space to solve their business use cases.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Manish. I am the managing director for a company called as Pitney Bowes. Pitney Bowes, different people know this company in different ways. It's a 90-year-old company, Fortune 500. Our primary business for a period of time was about hardware, franking machine, folders, inserters. And over the last quite a few years, we've actually been doing a lot of software things in customer analytics and customer communication management. So that's what I do.
All right. Thanks. So let's have some fun. So I have a set of prepared questions, and then as we are going through these questions, if you have any other questions or something's come to your mind, do let us know. We want to make this session interactive, so I'll try to leave as much time as possible for Q&A at the end. And the way I put it is that if you don't have enough questions, I have enough to last the whole hour. All right, so I'll start with Raghu. The first question I have for you is that...
Putting me on the spot first.
Sure. What kinds of investments are you making? Or,
as it relates to big data.
As it relates to big data. I mean,
otherwise I can go on
we don't want
day.
to know about the other investments which you're making, but when it comes to big data analytics.
I mean, big data in general, we as a fund are looking in India primarily to invest. Certainly there's a lot more opportunities in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Here it's in the early stages, so we've made one investment, but at the same time we're looking at a lot. Now, maybe since there's not a lot of active investments, not just us, but the other funds too, I'll sort of approach it from what are the areas that we're looking at. Broadly, we look at it in the sense that first there's, infrastructure, which, people like you, EMC, the hardware manufacturers, all of those are there. Then tools, analytics, and solutions. Tools is something where there are a lot of open source tools, what you're building on and so on, and there's certainly a lot of players there, and there may be space for some in, specific areas like data cleansing or process type things. But that's also an area that's probably not a sweet spot that we're looking at. When it comes to analytics and solutions, that's where we think the action is going to be. By and large, the infrastructure and the tool side is defined historically by the U.S. market, and that's pretty much happened here. So, but the analytics is where we believe the Indian mind can come in, because analytics requires a lot of, thought process in terms of statistics, mathematical thinking, all those kinds of stuff. That combined with domain knowledge is something that's going to be important. And the solutions really are the key. You can create all the analytics you want, but if you don't make it a usable solution to customers or end users or enterprises, one of the things that enterprises are having difficulty is they're also having a difficulty defining what exactly they need. So whoever can find a way to sort of make the analytics powerful but present it in a way that enterprises see it easy to use, that delivers benefit either in revenue generation, margin improvement, efficiency, resource efficiency, and therefore cost reduction. Those are sort of the thematic things that we look at. And if it hits those things, then it's something we'd look at.
So the next question I have is for Manish. Can you talk about one or two use cases which you see from an enterprise perspective?
Sure. So I can mention some from what we guys do at Pitney Bowes. So I think you kind of touched on. Let me make it interesting use case. It's a different question whether we absolutely implement that use case. So think about large banks, and I think I'll give an example of India, because this is probably an area where a lot of experimentation is happening. There are some real issues about it. But I can talk about a large bank with some millions and millions of customers, large public sector bank who really wants to get into the area of campaign management, live information view. So again, you're talking of, the business problem or the use case where there is documents, there's Twitter feeds, there's social things, they want to track it, and they want to really get to the whole thing of how can I do trans-promotional, how can I do upsell, cross-sell, how can I actually do a live? Every time you swipe a credit card, can I get the right information at the right time, depending on where the customer is, with the right promotion? Now, it looks almost unreal given the amount of issues we have, but that's a use case which is currently implemented in one of the biggest and the largest banks in India. So that's one. That's probably going into more traditional ways. But then there are other interesting use cases which may not be more Pitney Bowes, which is, I think a couple of months back I was in Goa at the Gartner conference, and they were talking about Internet of Things, bringing Internet of Everything, which is big data use cases where your parking meters to, your pretty much every device having a URL. Every device having a URL, and I think some of the statistics they were talking about was, I think 20 billion devices are connected always to internet, and 200 billion devices are connected intermittently to internet. Now those are use cases which are spinning off startups, whether you are in a taxi business or real estate business or video analytics or railways or other things. So we see those things, depending on the maturity of the organization, the cases are either implemented, but there's things happening in those spaces.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So Sunil, can you talk from your perspective when it comes to selling your technology? What are the use cases you are observing or you're trying to sell to?
Yeah, I think, a couple of use cases is just pure volume of data. I think as Susheel mentioned in the volume segment. One of the companies had just, like about 70 petabytes of data to deal with in their particular product, and the users getting, results back in reasonable amount of time. Something like about 10-15 seconds is what they have, an appetite for response time as such. So those are kind of, one just deals with the volume part of it. The other one, I think, in terms of, it's not so much of volume per se, but it's especially about the amount of data that we need to process in a certain amount of time, something like 100 megabytes per minute, right? In terms of, it's like Twitter times, but not necessarily like, as real time as Twitter. So that's why I guess Susheel come with the coffee time what's the definition of, coffee time, right? So, but it's about reasonably short time. How do you know how my transactions or, how my analytics are looking like? So there are a couple of use cases that we are seeing with our clients.
So let me throw in my color to this conversation. So based on what we are trying to do at EMC, some of the use cases, what we are finding, and I'll take a traditional enterprise. We imagine a huge chemical manufacturing plant, and their problem is to optimize the plant beyond what it has been operating at today. So challenges which they are facing, not challenges, but the use case which they have is, I have a model of a chemical process that's going on. Can we optimize it better? Can we have a better statistical algorithm which says, given these inputs and given these catalysts, will the outputs be any different? Will I be able to make more money off that? So this is about improving the data science or the algorithms behind that. That's one of the use cases which we are finding from an enterprise. Another one which is very favorite of mine is a standard manufacturing use case. So imagine you have a huge processing plant, and you're getting information from the sensors about how they're operating. So you're talking about pressure, volume, temperature. These are the key things which people are looking for, and vibration. What is being done right now is people are looking at 1 month's worth of history and predicting what is going to fail. Now, what can big data come in and do is take 7 years or 10 years worth of the operations and look at everything that has happened, and maybe find 10 or 15 different instances where you could have predicted 3 months in advance that a given part is going to fail. Now, that's basically what the businesses are interested in finding. And this is where big data analytics is coming in and helping some of the enterprises which we are dealing with. So that brings up a very interesting question, and again, I'll rotate through the panel, and I know I'm not picking on you. Is that, what is the fundamental difference between the early adopters and the enterprises when it comes to these use cases?
But you're making an assumption there are no early adopter enterprises. No, I don't know if I can sit and give you a silver bullet answer. Early adopters are ones that first recognize that there's a lot of data. They have a mindset that they can leverage data and find ways to use that for their business benefits. The people that take longer to adopt it are more steeped in their own legacy systems and things. And when you're talking about using big data, it's not just taking your old systems and taking the data and analyzing it. You have to you referred to it earlier, that there are different processes involved. You have to have a much more of an open mind. So if you don't have that, you will not be an early adopter. And even if you try, there will be enough causes for failure. And the first failure, people will throw up their hands and say, go away. So the early adopters and really the most successful ones will take an approach of saying, okay, we understand that this is different. There's a lot to be done. So we have to break the mold and do it again. I mean, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Southwest Airlines in the U.S., but most airlines in the U.S. now charge you for baggage, $25 for a checked-in baggage or whatever. Southwest doesn't. And they're leveraging it and saying, okay, it's something that we don't charge, so we're a better airline. But the behind-the-scenes story is that their legacy systems are so steep, and even though they're the newer airline, it restricts them from being able to do this. I mean, it's a simple thing, and so they're not able to do that. But if, as an organization, you're steeped in your legacy systems and processes, I don't mean just IT systems, business processes and how you do things. If that is something that you find hard to change, then it's going to be difficult. And then the second thing is really, what we talked about, data scientists, that requires a slightly new breed person. The people that use it later can be retained, but these group of people are people that have to have a different mindset than the traditional IT type of people. And if they don't do that, then there's going to be an issue. So people may try it, but if they don't have the mindset and the ability to create anew, then they will have issues.
Okay. So the next question for, let's say, Manish, is it easy to sell into enterprises versus the early adopters, the way I defined it, incorrect though it may be?
So my response would be, I don't think it does. I don't think it matters whether you're an early adopter or an enterprise or even a startup who has an ambition of being a large or a small or medium-sized business. I think the way I look at it, and especially when I go and, I'm a consumer of big data because of what we do. I'm also a producer of solutions which actually help people to analyze. And I think the example would be a car example. So if you're driving a car on a highway, you've got a rear view mirror, you've got a dashboard, which is your speedometer and things, and you've got a nice GPS device in your car, which is giving you the road and the direction. If you look at the rear view mirror, it's more about the hindsight data. It's about the past. It's about things which I have, and I need to make decisions based on what I'm seeing in the back rear view mirror. Your dashboard, which is your speedometer, how much fuel do I have, what do I have, that's your insights. That's your live, present view of things based on what you're seeing in the past, what you're seeing. And what's the foresight is that nice device, which is really fancy, which is telling you this is where the road's going, this is where it's going to be, this is how much time it's going to take. So in some ways, I think you can classify enterprises or organizations into if you're in an organization which does not have tools to even capture the past, you can't make decisions on the present, which essentially means if you're investing in things which are to predict future or to predict, I call it more, it's not even predictive analytics, it's more prescriptive analytics. So it's about which stage an enterprise is. If you have tools, if you're struggling with, with single sign-on problems in your enterprise, maybe big data analytics and moving into those directions is not the way to go for, and that's an adoption. And I see that's an adoption barrier. That's almost an entry barrier for your CTOs or your engineering organizations to actually move into that space. That's one view. I'll just add another view to this thing is the conversation. Are you talking to a CIO or are you talking to a CMO? They're selling big data solutions. If you're selling to a CTO, the return on investment on that solution or the investment is going to be captured very differently. But if you're talking to a CMO, you probably are going to adopt the big data solutions and the investment in a very different way. So that's how I kind of see when I go and sell and talk to the enterprise.
Would it be fair to say from your experience talking to the enterprises and trying to sell into the enterprises that fundamentally when you're trying to sell a big data solution into an enterprise, you're fundamentally going to disrupt the way they are organized and disrupt the way they do their existing processes and how they operate?
What we have noticed is the big data solution or what they're looking for is typically comes from a particular team or a department. It's sort of saying, let me explore this. This could be possibly a solution. Either maybe cost effective or, just is a solution to do, right? So that's where we see. We haven't noticed as in like large scale adoption across the enterprise. That may happen a little later, but right now what's coming up is a particular department or a particular team actually coming to us and saying, this is the problem I have. One of the cases was, actually calculating market risk for a financial investment bank. And it's about today they only do 2 days of data. That's what they can handle with the current technologies. So now they're looking at, the big data technologies to say, I want to actually look at 6 months worth of data in calculating my market risk. So those are the use cases that are actually coming through for us. That's what we see it. But other space where we see adoption is actually on the system side, where there's logs and loggings and all kinds of data that's coming out from the sense systems and traditional what we call IT data. That's where we see a lot more uptake for the big data solutions.
So then I'll throw in my color. Based on my experience at EMC, what we are finding is that fundamentally when you talk to enterprises, you're talking business. You are not talking about technology at all. You're trying to sell how an existing marketing organization can do better with the money they get, or how can an existing plant be more efficient. And it was very interesting to me when someone told me that my plants are running at 110% and I want to make them go to 120%. I was scratching my head initially as to how are you running at 110% today. And then later on I figured out that you have a capacity which you create when you're designing a plant. So it was designed for 100, let's say, generating 500 tons of chemical. It's producing 550. So you're running at 110%. And what you really want to do is using the same plant and maybe changing the processes, you want to generate 600 tons of that same chemical. Anyways, so the key thing here is that it's all about how you sell, and selling big data analytics to an enterprise is all about business. It's got nothing to do with technology. They will buy the same solution if it were working on a spreadsheet also. The next question is around the challenges which you see at an enterprise when it comes to adopting big data analytics. So this time I'll start from the left side. So Manish, do you have any thoughts on what are the top challenges?
So I think it goes back to the point which I made earlier. I think we've seen one of the biggest challenge is, so the practical challenge is anytime you go and talk to an enterprise is, do I have tools and infrastructure to combine all of the different data sources? You're talking of data sources coming in from external and internal. You're talking of transaction data, videos, and name the different sources from all of those things. Now, even if I have the tools and I make the right investment in getting all of those, my second problem in adopting is the quality. So the data quality, and especially when you talk about emerging markets like India, where there's data standardization problems. So we have a large business of location intelligence and GIS. We sell maps of India, and we run into the problem because of standardization issues. Anybody can actually change the name of the road, change the addresses at any given point of time because there's no regulatory framework in place. Now, when you run into those data quality issues where the names are not standardized, the street addresses are not standardized, the location, and I think these are the problems that even UID is facing right now in terms of data quality. And the third one is, I overcome these two, I don't have the internal resources, and I'm talking especially on large companies which have a bigger problem because they have to hold the current business and still be able to move into the newer emerging businesses. So anytime you have to hold the fort and kind of move forward, you run into the problem of internal resources. These are the three real practical problems which most enterprises, I would say, would be facing.
Yeah, very good insight. And my personal pet peeve here is that when you talk about addresses in India, they are more of directions than of an actual street address. Anyways, same question to you, Sunil.
In terms of challenges?
In terms of the top, what are the three challenges or the top 2 or 3 challenges which you believe enterprises are facing?
I think it's largely about, I think there's so much of information or so much of talk about big data itself, right? I mean, and technologies and in the technologies, so that's what we see it. Now, how do you essentially, apply all of that that's there in the outside? How do you essentially, figure out which one is the right fit for the solution that you're looking at, or what actually fits in the enterprise itself? That's, I think, is one of the challenges that we keep finding, because there is this notion that, say Hadoop or any other technology is like a silver bullet, but actually it is not. So the challenge that we see it, and it goes back to how we define solutions and hence to the enterprises. It's actually then we go back to say in terms of the basics, in terms of how much is your disk I/O, the network, and the CPU and memory that's available to build a cost-effective solution. So how do you look at all of those things and pair it with, your current solution to make sure that happens? So in which essence what happens is, when looking at big data, you're also, in some sense, looking at the other trends, right? The other technology of cloud computing and elasticity in that. So those are the things that we see, the challenges that the enterprise face in terms of that there is no single product or something that out there I can just download and use it, but look at it more holistically. And the other thing I want to touch upon is, largely when clients come to us, they say, I have a big data problem. But actually, we first try to understand, is it actually big data? So in some cases, it's about once we organize it and, we actually figure out how do you actually do it, right? Could be a binary serialized data in files or whatever that is, it actually doesn't seem so big after that. Because then it becomes, much more tackleable problem for us. So that's the challenge that we see in enterprise.
Right. Raghu, the same question for you also.
I'm not sure. I have sold for many years, so but I can sort of one level removed. I think fundamentally, anytime a new paradigm comes in, it's no different when ERP came in or any of the others. It's organizations need to get mentally and practically ready for it. Like Sunil just said, it's not just saying, I'm going to put Hadoop and it'll be the silver bullet that'll solve all my problems. You really need to take a fairly down to fundamentals approaches. What is it that I'm trying to achieve? And what is the appropriate way? Do I have the resources, physical, human, all those kinds of things? Think those through. And too often people just go in because they hear the buzzword that is happening, even at large enterprises, they do it and then it doesn't work out. And that failure becomes a reason why it's an obstacle. But by and large, if people can get over that and organize themselves to think from a fundamental perspective, there will be success. What that means for companies when you're starting up something is that to look at those issues, for a failure there is going to reflect badly on you. So you should really look at making sure that your customers are prepared, educate them on what's needed, and then actually give them the solution. If you ignore that, then you and them will have a hard time.
Excellent, thanks. So at this point in time, I will like to do a poll on how many questions are there in the audience. So I see 4 or 5 hands. I think at this point we would open the floor for questions, but before doing that, I would like to do a quick close on this. Basically, based on my experience, what I'm finding is that even if you talk about big data analytics or analytics in any form, you spend 80% of the time not in data science, but in all other aspects of it, which means collecting your data, cleaning your data. So you're doing so much of hard, laborious work that analytics is a very small piece in the puzzle. So you need to focus on your business problem and make sure that you're solving the needs of the business problem. And you have to, at the end of the day, make it easy for the enterprises or the business users to understand. My favorite quote here in this one is that I am a patient and I go to the doctor and I say, I have these symptoms. What is the recommendation you have? The doctor says, you know what, this medicine is great for you, but here is a huge list of side effects. And the answer which I tell him is that, you know what, I would rather live with my symptoms than take this medicine. So same thing what you want to do is do for your enterprise customers is that when you go with recommendations to them, make sure that they have the ability to understand what those side effects are. Anyways,